ladies and gentlemen. I am Wille, the president of Manatee Tiger Bay. Our topic today is red tide, algae blooms, contaminated groundwater, and what's up with our water quality. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Becky Canesse, she's the Chief Executive Officer of Manatee County Girls Club, Inc., doing business as Just for Girls, and she is an environmental advocate. Ed Childs, a business owner of the Childs Group and board member of START, which stands for Solutions to Avoid Red Tide. Charlie Hunsicker is the director of Manatee County's Parks and Natural Resources Department, and Alan Jones is the owner of Jones Potato Farm. Now I'd like to read short biographies of each, and we'll start with Becky. Becky Canesse is the CEO of a nationally acclaimed organization and its foundation, established to help create a brighter future for children and inspire girls and young women toward achieving their full potential. Her work has been recognized with awards from the U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, Florida's Department of Children and Families Positive Behavior Support Model Schools Awards, and the Governor's Best Practices Awards. She is an alumnus of Leadership Manatee and Leadership Tampa Bay. She served on the Metropolitan Planning Organization's Board of Directors. She is on the Tiger Bay Club's Board of Directors, having served as its treasurer, and the League of Women Voters Education Committee. Throughout her life, she has been active in environmental advocacy and conservation, was a charter member of the Nature Conservancy, and is a member of the Sierra Club. Church Women United, through its United Nations office, presented Mrs. Canesse with its Human Rights Award for her leadership and service as a mentor and social activist in human rights and human development. Ed Childs is a business owner with the Childs Group and a board member of Solutions to Avoid Red Tide. He was raised in Lakeland and has been a resident of Anna Maria Island since 1978. His culinary career started at the ATO House at the University of Florida, where he was the, quote, pots and pans washer. His love for food and the fact that he had a political science degree, he needed to find a way to make a living, eventually steering him into a decades-long hospitality career. His first job after obtaining his degree was as a dishwasher at Joe's Stone Crab in Miami. Today, Ed is the owner of 3 of the area's highest volume restaurants on Anna Maria Island and Longboat Key, as well as a partner in the rapidly growing Papo's Taqueria chain. He supplies his restaurants with certified organic produce from his farm, Gamble Creek, and with sustainable and heritage products sourced from local farmers, fishermen, and ranchers, as well as wine from Lola Wines in Napa Valley, California, where he is also a partner. As a founder of both Solutions to Avoid Tide and the Gulf Shellfish Institute, GSI, Ed pursues efforts in research and development to mitigate harmful algae blooms that adversely impact the various marine species in our waters, and promotes bivalve aquaculture, shell recycling, and marine habitat restoration. Charlie Hunsicker holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Agriculture from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in Urban and Regional Planning from Florida State University. Starting his career with Manatee County in 1977, Mr. Hunsicker has been involved with a wide variety of environmental issues ranging from conserving lands to beach renourishment. He oversees 6 divisions which touch the lives of every citizen in Manatee County: the resources management, ecological and marine services, environmental protection, volunteer/education, agriculture, and extension and recreation. He also directs the beach renourishment program for Anna Maria Island's 9 miles of sandy beach and serves as commission liaison for Florida's congressional delegation. Alan Jones is the owner of Jones Potato Farm, which began in 2001 when Alan bought out his father, and today Jones Potato Farm consists of 4,000 acres in northern Manatee County and LaBelle, Florida. He was awarded the 4R Nutrient Advocate Award, Commissioner Putman's Agriculture Environmental Leadership Award, the Sustainable Business Award from the Sustainy Foundation of Tampa Bay, and the Grower Achievement Award from American Vegetable Grower Magazine. Jones incorporated precision agriculture into his operation with grid sampling of nutrients and soil types, and many techniques to not only conserve water, but also help with erosion, irrigation runoff, and pollution. Jones has been involved in the Farm to School program and served on the Board of Directors of Manatee County Farm Bureau, Bradenton Economic Development Council, and Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association. He welcomes organizations to his farms for tours and supports local nonprofits that serve children and families. Jones Potato Farm's vision is to produce more with less by adhering to sustainable practices, drastically reducing its carbon footprint, conserving and improving available natural resources of our state, providing a habitat for a variety of wildlife, and ensuring a lasting community impact for years to come. And we will start with Becky Canesse.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and it's my goal to try to inform you and help make you aware so that you can be better protected from health concerns relating to our water. When we put this program together, it was our intention to have businesses and organizations involved who have experienced an impact, and I represent an individual who's been impacted. And with that in mind, I'd like to just be real clear that normally when I speak to groups in Manatee County and around the country, I'm representing the organization where I'm employed. And today I'll be speaking only on a personal basis to describe my journey to all of you, what I've been through, and at the end, encourage you with some things that you can do to protect yourselves. It was a year ago tomorrow that I started the surgeries related to multiple cancer diagnoses. The January pre-op meeting, I was in Moffitt Cancer Center, and I really have to thank that surgeon for my ability to speak to you today, because the highest risk of my surgery was potential for her to cut the nerve to the vocal cords. And when I read the post-op surgery report, about every half a minute she was checking on that nerve, checking, and I don't know how long the surgery took. It took me about 2 hours before I woke up. And the first thing I wanted to do was say something. And you know, if you've been through surgery, the first question you ask is, what time is it? And I'm very grateful to have my voice and be able to talk to you. The surgery that I had was thyroid cancer. It's a carcinoma. I also had in the muscle of my neck a sarcoma, a very rare and aggressive form. And when they first told me about it, it was fast and intense. I think I was in denial at the beginning. I'm always healthy, and I don't have a high-risk lifestyle. And I also had multiple surgeries for melanoma. And the reason I'm describing all of that is for you to understand how shocking it was and how amazing it is to me to think that I would have that many cancers, let alone even one. And there was a question that was asked of me by my surgeon's physician's assistant, the PA. You know, when it's head and neck, he's literally right in your face when he's talking to you. And he leaned in with great intensity and said, "Where have you been exposed to massive amounts of radiation?" and I just couldn't imagine what he was asking me. I said, well, I've had some dental x-rays when I get an annual checkup at the dentist. He said, no, I'm talking about Chernobyl levels. And I'm going to be asking you that when we finish today. Where have you been exposed to massive amounts of radiation? I was so bothered by that question, and it was a life-transforming question. I couldn't think at that point, they're testing, and we were preparing for surgery. But when I was asleep in the middle of the night, that's when I do my best thinking, when things get still. And I woke up and I remembered the sinkhole 2 years prior that dumped 215 million gallons of radioactive waste into our aquifer. And I live in East Manatee County with our horses, dogs, and a cat, my husband. And I knew it was in our water, so I asked the health department in Manatee County, and they don't test for radium. And of course, we had the water tested when we moved in, and they test for E. coli and bacteria and chloroform and nitrates and nitrites. And they don't even know, they aren't even capable of testing for radium. And I didn't even know at that point what I needed to test for, but they gave me a list of certified labs. I asked them what I needed to do. They gave me instructions. There's a chain of custody. It's very scientific, very outside my normal world of children's services and education, but it does align with prevention education. And for me to try to talk to you about what's causing cancer here in Manatee County and my own personal experience, my test results came back after 2 weeks where they started out testing alpha and beta emitters. That tells us if there's radioactivity in there. It's an energy that they can test. And then they started testing for other things. They can test for uranium and radium, and it can go on. And so I just followed their lead. And we found alpha was much higher than safe limits, and the radium in my well water in East Manatee County is 3 times higher than safe limits. And I couldn't move fast enough to put the word out on my Facebook page for all my neighbors and friends. I hooked up with the Neighborhood Connections, and we have the way to talk to our neighbors out there. And my neighbors started testing their well, and we started to discover there's a lot of radium and a lot of cancer in Manatee County. And, curing cancer is one thing, but preventing it is the key. So thank you for the opportunity to put the word out about this important issue, and for me to share some of what I've learned along the way. I did study the Mosaic sinkhole collapse, and I came to find out that they've been mining in Manatee County and around Florida for 100 years. And they've had more than just that one sinkhole collapse. There have been several. One in 1994 dumped 65 million gallons of radio waste into the Floridan aquifer. In 2009, EPA found high radioactivity in the aquifer, and then they stopped abruptly studying it. We don't know why. In 2012, the Southwest Florida Water Management District granted Mosaic a permit to pump up to 70 million gallons of water a day out of the ground for the next 20 years. Mosaic is using some of that water to dilute the pollution it dumps into area creeks and streams so that it won't violate state regulations. When their toxicity is so high, they just add more water to it so it'll pass. That doesn't help all of us that are drinking that water, that they're actually concentrating the radioactivity in the aquifer. We all know it's in there naturally, but what's happening as a result of the phosphate mining, and they're finding this through testing, is that radioactivity is more highly concentrated as a result of phosphate mining. So after they gave them the permit to pull 70 million gallons of water a day out of the aquifer to help even dilute the toxicity, in 2015, Mosaic agreed to a nearly $2 billion fine for mismanaging their toxic waste. After that, they put out a press release and said that they intend to be good neighbors and good stewards. And It was just a year later that 215 million gallons of radioactive waste fell into the aquifer. Now, experts on phosphate mining will tell you that those gyp stacks, I've seen different levels, some are 400 feet and some are 200 feet. They will tell you that those are so toxic that they're eating away the liner that contains them. And when there's a sinkhole, it has already been leaking, they call it a very long time before the sinkhole actually occurs. And there's tests that do reveal that sinkholes are related to the depletion of the aquifer by all those millions of gallons being pulled out of there every day, weakening the aquifer so it collapses, and those sinkholes are happening all around our area. In 2017, Manatee County approved a rezoning request and an approval for Mosaic to expand their mining. And this just goes on and on. In 2018, we have even more permits that have been violated by Mosaic and information that proves that there is toxic waste in our water. So with all those millions of gallons and all those high numbers and huge fines, there's the number one. And the number one is that this is one business that's been given an opportunity to destroy tourism and agriculture here in Florida. And we need to talk to our elected officials and help them understand the importance of public health above corporate greed. We'll talk more during the question and answers.
Ed Childs needs no introduction, but there it is. Your turn.
Thank you, and Becky, thanks for telling us your story. Let me just start by giving a major thanks to Charlie Hunsicker, to all the staff out on the beaches, to our county for the way that they went into action to try, and they were effective in mitigating what we had to live through and are still living through here, and what went on in a really elevated way from the middle of August until the end of September. Those people were out there on a daily basis, led by Mark Taylor, who worked, I think, 28 days straight.
Yes, he did.
On that tractor, cleaning up our beaches on a daily basis so that we could put our best foot forward in terms of how we dealt with this issue. I was asked to come here today and speak on two topics. One, is there any solution? Is there any way to control and mitigate red tide? And I certainly can talk to that today. And also, what do you think of our water policy in the state of Florida? Second one's pretty easy. Our water policy in the state of Florida has been going backwards, seriously going backwards for the last 8, 10, 12 years, and we've had major problems with our water policy in this state since the 50s. The fact is that we're putting polluted water into our inland waterways and to our marine environment at very high levels. And now, where are we? I'm not sure. I'm afraid. I've been dealing with red tide. We all been dealing with red tide. We know red tide. Red tide is a natural occurring organism. My dad used to say that, and he would say orgasm sometime. It got him into a lot of trouble. I find that I've said that a couple times, so if I say that today, please excuse me. It's in the genes, I guess. But it's a naturally occurring organism. Yeah, it's a natural occurring organism, and that's what you hear a lot of times when people are trying to address the issue, and I hear that a lot of times from politicians. And what I want to hear next is also a fact, that nutrient loading feeds red tide. All right? So we've got a natural occurring organism, and it's coming more and more often, and it's becoming more and more intense. And where is that going to lead us? And that's what I'm not sure about. But I am sure of this. I don't want to be the generation that where we reach the tipping point and where our children and grandchildren do not get to enjoy the Florida that we enjoy. And I don't want to be, I got naked self-interest here, which I think is one of the most powerful motivators, all right? I'm at risk, and we are all at risk. We are at risk for our livelihoods. We are putting paradise at risk. We are at a health risk. And so it's time to start banging on the table and doing something about it. I think it's time that we say to those, anyone that is polluting our inland or marine waterways, stop. Either do it right or don't do it. You can do it right. Farmers can do it right. Ranchers can do it right. People that are doing developments can do it right, and we've all got a stake in it. Counties can do it right. Sewage treatment plants can be done right. Stormwater runoff can be handled in a better way. We can change what we do on our lawns. We can change what we're doing in Lake Okeechobee. But what we've got to do is we've got to marshal our forces. Winston Churchill said, never waste a crisis. We're in a crisis right now with red tide. So let's not waste the crisis. Let's use this crisis to harness the concern and the fear and the naked self-interest that's out there to demand action on the municipal level, on the city level, on the county level, on the state level, on the regional level, on the national level, on water quality issues. I think it's time for the younger generation to ask us to get the hell out of the way. I got 20 years left. They've got 70 years left. They are at a point where, we're all at a point where they may not be able to enjoy the benefits that we've been able to enjoy. And that's just wrong on every level. Can we control and mitigate red tide? Yeah, there are things that we can do. Can we stop it? No. But we can certainly stop the blooms for getting worse by controlling nutrient loading, and we can certainly look for methods and methodologies to deal with it in small and bay levels, mode of studying ozone. We started the START organization, Solution to Avoid Red Tide, in 95, 96. I was a founding member of that. That was because of the red tide bloom that almost put me out of business. I'd just done the beach house there. I'd spent a couple of $1 million. That red tide outbreak lasted for 11 months and 21 days. Lost all of our employees. And so we started then knowing that we weren't going to get any solutions right away. It was going to be a long-term process. We were educating people. We were working on prediction methodologies, which have gotten a lot better, tracking, being able to tell people that, yeah, red tide is out there, but you can look at the reports and you can see where it is and where it isn't. And so we have had some successes there, and we're an organization that continues to try to push that. And I encourage all of you that if you want to join this cause and you're concerned, to go to start1.org. That's the Red Tide website. We're changing the splash page now to have a call to action, and that will be one of the many kind of placeholders for what I hope we rev up now that the election is over in terms of mobilizing people to work on this on a multi-level approach in terms of a comprehensive approach to nutrient loading and to all the different organizations in the county and the policymakers and the different groups that we need to work with. That's the answer to the water policy issue. I want to talk a little bit about clams in the minute or two that I have left, if I have a minute left. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got 92% of the seafood that you eat in the United States of America right now is imported. 50% of that is aquaculture. We are producing 1% of the world's aquaculture in the United States of America. So it may not be guns and tanks and planes that threaten us. It very well may be what you put on the center of your plate, protein, in 20 years. So we need to get into that game. You live in the only area in the country that has 3 national estuaries on its border. We are ground zero here for raising bivalves. Water quality, when there's not red tide. Nutrient levels, water temperature, clams grow, bivalves grow faster in warmer water than they do in cold water. You've got 287,000 acres of shellfish approved waters in the state of Florida. And guess what percentage are leased? 1%. Bivalves, you can ask Mote Marine. Jim Coulter is one of the bivalve experts from Mote Marine, and they will tell you in the last red tide outbreak, they had the highest cell counts for red tide per liter that they've ever measured. 90 million cells per liter. Only 2 or 3 species of crabs lived through that in Sarasota Bay, and clams. Now, you've heard a lot about scallops and putting scallops out, and that's a great thing, and I'm all for scallops, and scallops are the canary in the mine. Why? Because they fall off the limb really quick. Super sensitive. Live 13 months. I'm all for putting scallops in, but now we're putting clams in too, because they live for 35 years. They filter 40 gallons of water a day, and they eat red tide, and they live through red tide. So our clam farmers are out there now, and they're in trouble, just like everybody else that's working on the coast is in trouble. But they're in more trouble because when red tide goes away, but it's still there because the counts are too high for the clam beds to be opened up for those clam farmers. So they're dying on the vine. And their clams are getting bigger and they're getting less valuable because the consumption market is for little necks and middle necks, white tablecloth restaurants. But when they get top neck or quahog or big, they're not as valuable. So what should we do? We ought to help those farmers. We don't give them insurance. We ought to incentivize them. So buy those clams. That's brood stock. Let's figure out how we keep that in the water to live for another 33 years, to filter 40 gallons of water a day, to live through red tides, to address the aquaculture, to clean our waters, and to be a model for the things that we can do here in this area to show what we're doing for water quality. Thank you very much.
Now we're going to hear from Charlie Hunsicker.
Wow. Thank you. I want to thank the restaurant that's provided this meal today. As a restaurateur, this takes a little bit of effort to get out these meals and make them delicious the way they were. And I want to thank whoever is back there, the servers. Make sure that we thank them on our way out. I've never wanted to follow Ed Childs, and I keep remind myself that every time he speaks. And Ed, and Becky, again, to your losses, to your hardships, and to your victory over your system, I thank you. I wanted to say some things about things that have been remarked here just quickly. As to our water systems here in Manatee County, of course, the water you're drinking from your table actually has come from Everett's Reservoir in Bradenton. It's a city water supply. It's tested along with the water that we take from Lake Manatee and deep aquifers around Lake Manatee. Our waters come from 1,200 feet to 1,500 feet down below the ground. And the residential wells that Becky and others have, where they're not served with potable water service, are usually tapped into an aquifer that lies above that at about 200 feet below the ground. It's a multiple layer cake out in Manatee County, several layers all the way from salt water from the very depths up to fresh water to confinement to keep them where they are, and then more layers of fresh water all the way to the surface where rainfall falls. So Lake Manatee captures surface water, and we take our groundwater from 12 to 1,400 feet below the ground that is buffered, separated from anything that we might be doing on the surface of the land. And we test that water supply on a continuous basis every second. We test differently on hourly. We do different tests daily, different tests monthly, and different tests annually to make sure that the water that we're drinking is always safe. The city of Bradenton does exactly the same thing from Lake Manatee. I wanted to say that also, Ed, you've posed some questions to the group. Where are we? Where are we going? It is a team effort. Ed is one of our colleagues as it works with the industry, as it works to trying to find solutions for red tide. And my talk is what's being done. I kind of put a paper out there. If I can't get it all out in 1 second, it's a take-home document for you so you can kind of follow along at what Manatee County is doing, along with our colleagues both north and south, along Sarasota's southwest, along the southwest coast of Florida, to address both short-term and long-term effects. But I want to point out some team members, in addition to Ed and his colleagues in the restaurant and restaurant industry, and the tourism industry. For the government, there's some of my team members are here today. One of them, of course, is Jocelyn Hong. Jocelyn Hong is from Washington, D.C. She's here to talk with our group today and the commissioners later this afternoon about our congressional policies and our congressional programs that we have each and every year. She's worked with Manatee County since 1995 and well understands these issues and has been the lead point in working in Washington with the Food and Drug Administration and with the health agencies to build that insurance product for fishermen and clam farmers, and taking that effort and direction from the Board of County Commissioners to take efforts that we can do to improve and reduce the uncertainty of farming in the waters of Manatee County. I also want to introduce Dr. Angela Collins, who is also here today, who holds a PhD in marine fisheries and is our Extension Sea Grant agent, part of our county employment structure that is working for you to try to find those long-term solutions that might be out there to lower the kinds of nutrients that we continue to add to our bay waters to enrich red tide when it comes ashore, which is pretty much what everyone has recognized. It's there. When it comes ashore, it feeds on the excess nutrients that deliver from our lands, the uses that we do. And what can we do to try to lower the intensity and severity and duration of red tide when it comes ashore is to attack those nutrients. And I want to talk a little bit about what we do in Manatee County for that. Of course, there are short-term responses. You all saw it, and Ed mentioned it. We were out there for several months raking the beaches where we could with equipment that could pass in a large volume capacity operation to collect the fish that were dead and dying along the beach. In the tied-up areas, we had to rake it up with road gang individuals, people who are normally released for work from DeSoto Correctional Institution and from the Manatee County Jail. Raking the fish up, bagging it, shipping it away. One of the handouts I have just kind of goes into a summary of how many tons of fish have been collected in this last 4 months. It seems like every fish is gone. As part of our beach renourishment, we also monitor our offshore hard bottom environments, our live bottoms that are out there. And just last month, after the red tide dropped down to levels that we could stand it when we were diving, we were passing over what we call Spanish rocks, which is about a 6 to 7 acre hard bottom reef system offshore of Braden Beach, about 300 feet to about 100 yards and further offshore. Our divers came back and said, Charlie, I saw one fish, and that one fish wasn't doing very well. I often wonder that we're not, even though we're still seeing the high levels of red tide along our shorelines as measured in colonies per liter, we're not seeing a number of dead fish like we used to. I'm afraid it's because the fish aren't there. There's a multiple effect, because when an organism dies in our environment, it immediately starts to decompose. And as it does, oxygen is used to break apart the molecules of the body and bring it back into the environment, dust to dust. Same thing happens in a water column. So if you load on a number of dead fish, they die and they drop to the bottom and they start to decompose. It extracts oxygen out of the water. So even if organisms are not directly affected by the red tide algae, they suffocate and die because there's no oxygen in the water to sustain them. And so not only do you get finfish dying, clams, oysters that survive, but crabs and all the other living organisms, the reef environment starts to die. The sea fans, the corals, even the algae. And so some of our offshore reefs at the moment look like deserts. They used to be resplendent with plants that you could see, sea fans waving. That's all gone. They're all dead. Now, we've had research papers talk about recovery. And recovery is always important, because I'm here to take the long view. What are we doing and where are we going? Don't forget that Sarasota Bay, our receiving body of water out here, over the long term, has seen a substantial improvement in the clarity of water and water quality because of the things that we're doing on shore, because of the actions we're taking to treat stormwater, because of the actions we're taking to reduce even those nutrients in our treated wastewater that we use to water our lawns and our golf courses and our public spaces. That stuff, by the way, still runs off as stormwater. But if we have spent in the county approximately $21 million on our own accord, without a requirement of the state, without a consent order or some kind of regulatory decree, to cut those nitrogen levels in our reclaimed water in half. And that goes a long way to helping Sarasota Bay have the same amount of seagrass on its bottom that it's had since the early 50s, when less than 800,000 people were not here. We're one of the few estuaries in the country that, as our population grows, our water quality improves. And that is due, in fact, by the stewardship that's taken by our county with wastewater treatment, but it also goes back to other things that we're also already doing for these long-term effects, some of which I've talked about in the paper here. For instance, we were one of the few counties to hold fast to a summertime fertilizer ban, which has kind of not cured the problem, but it's kept it from getting worse. Because we know that when we were applying fertilizers inappropriately at high levels, I'm a homeowner. I used to throw a bag of fertilizer in one of those lawn spreaders. Every time I turn a corner, a bunch of it would drop out. I said, oh, there it is. I kept going. The untrained people like myself would waste that fertilizer. It would pile up and run off. Well, that multiplied by tens of thousands of people have an effect. So we've been trying to kind of control that by lowering the application of fertilizers during the summer rainy seasons, and we've had a good result. I want to also say that in addition to wastewater treatment, we're doing a lot with our extension service to take a look at the stormwater lakes that are in our developments. These are places where our nutrients are collected before they're discharged into the open environment. And by planting shallow zones with healthy wetland plants, doing some buffering around the edges of the lakes, we can help those stormwater ponds do a better job in capturing, holding those nutrients before they're released. These things homeowners can do, homeowner associations can do. And finally, I want to say, in addition to the heavy research that's out here, that's outlined in this, again in my paper, that's being done by MODE, by the START organization, and by others that are taking a look at affecting both the long-term and the short-term effects of the tide, I want to say with some degree of pride that the Board of County Commissioners has supported over 1,400 acres of land conversion. Not conversion to development, but conversion back to the wetlands that were here before we settled this area. Places like Robinson Preserve, Emerson Point, Preco, Riverview Point, Neal Preserve, the Fish Preserve. Nothing to do with the county. An action by the volunteers that are really working that. The Florida Institute of Saltwater Heritage area in Cortez. These are the lands that provide nurseries to restock and recover the fisheries and the organisms that are part of the mortality of red tide. That's why we come back. That's why it comes back year after year. I tried to say to folks that beyond the red tide incident, if you can see past it, we have a beautiful environment here. We have one that sustains record tourism because record numbers of people want to enjoy what we have in Manatee County, that we still have. We haven't lost it. It comes back. Research over the offshore areas say within 2 years, maybe sometimes as long as 5, what you see decimated will grow back. Why? Because we have healthy nurseries surrounding these locations that are readily available to restock and repopulate what happens to be spot issues along this beautiful, huge Gulf of Mexico. So I'm here to give a three-part story. We work at taxpayer expense to reduce the immediate effects of dead fish on the beach, the stench, and the terrible issues that follow. But we also work at taxpayers' expense on the long-term prevention measures that can reduce the severity and duration of red tide effects. And we also believe, because we live in a wonderful place like this, that recovery is quick and that we can continue to see beyond the short-term problem, not let a crisis go by without an attack plan, but to also hold in the back of our minds that we do live in a beautiful community that has proven itself year in and year out to be a beautiful place. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Charlie. Now we'll hear from Alan Jones.
Well, that's a tough crowd to follow right there. I'll tell you, Becky, I really appreciate you bringing that to light about our water quality from a radon and radioactive standpoint. You know, if we all have the right information, we all can make the right decisions. And until you get that right information and knowledge, you're limiting yourself for sure. And to Ed Child's accord, eat more clams, all right? So I appreciate it. And, you know, Charlie and I have worked tirelessly over the years and done a lot of great things here for Manatee County, conserving land and implementing a lot of programs that we've worked together on. I can't say enough for him and what he's done for Manatee County and will continue to do for Manatee County. So really what I wanted to come and talk to you all about today was, I think we all know what the problem is, you know, and so how can we come up with a solution to manifest and to doing something better than what we are today. And so implementing a best management plan is something that should not be new to anybody. I think it was done in the Chesapeake Bay region many years ago with great success. And so I asked my question, well, why can't we do that here in the state of Florida? Why can't we all ask ourselves, what can I do to make a difference, with the thought that if we all do a little bit, it's going to cumulatively add up to a whole lot. So with that being said, you know, it's important to know that we all have a carbon footprint. There's emissions that come from our lifestyle, and you know, what happens to those emissions are basically the nutrients that are fed into the environment, and so how do we reduce those things? Harmful algae blooms are fed by onshore nutrient loads, exactly as Ed said, you know, and so the only way that we're going to be able to make an impact into these harmful algae blooms is to reduce or eliminate those nutrient loads into the environment. So if you live in Florida, if you do business in Florida, if you visit Florida, you're part of that problem, okay? So once we all can come to that accord, we all can have a good conversation about what do we need to do to be a part of the solution. So part of my handouts, and it's a little bit of a lesson about Florida in general, is watersheds. If there's a drop of water that falls on the state of Florida, it goes somewhere. And so this is primarily basically a map about the watersheds in southwest Florida and the different rivers and streams and coastal estuaries that we all live in. And so the impacts that we have are fed through these major watersheds. And so I think there's 11 major watersheds within the Southwest Florida Water Management District. And through all these conversations, there's been a lot of talk about Lake Okeechobee and Big Sugar and all of these different things that they're ruining our environment. And so I thought it was very important that to turn to the next page and speak specifically to that Okeechobee watershed. It starts at Bonnie Creek, which is basically Highway 50 in Orlando, okay? It is loaded from Orlando south. All of Mickey Mouse's good stuff, it comes right down into the Lake Okeechobee, okay? And so it's important that once you understand all that, I would ask you to turn to the next page. And it speaks to the Northern Everglades Okeechobee inflow, and it speaks specifically to the amount of nutrients that are fed into Lake Okeechobee and where they come from. So we've got a very astute group of people here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. We can look at this, and it was put together not by Big Sugar. It was done by the South Florida Water Management District, okay? This was 2015. We couldn't ask for better information. So where do we need to be treating this water? Coming out Lake Okeechobee? Is Lake Okeechobee not any important? That's a beautiful watershed. We need to protect Lake Okeechobee. So in all reality, we need to be treating that water on the north side of the lake before it goes into Lake Okeechobee through above ground storage facilities. So we can drop those nutrients out of that water, and from there either restore that historical flow into Lake Okeechobee that will then go into the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie watersheds. Other options are to take excess flow at high water events and to inject that appropriate water once you've had the nutrition levels reduced into the boulder zone or deeper aquifers That is water storage that we can reuse again in the future. So not only do we have a water quality problem, but with all the thousands and thousands of people that are moving to Florida, we've got a water consumption issue as well. And so Florida's not going to stop growing. I think there's 1,000 people a day that move in the state of Florida today. So it's really up to us as community leaders and state leaders to try to help educate people on sound science, cool minds, and thoughtful solutions. The next thing I want to talk about was agriculture's proactive role in implementing best management practices. We've been working tirelessly with the water management districts, Florida Department of Agriculture, through outreach for the last 25 to 30 years, all trying to teach us as agriculture entrepreneurs to do more with less, to conserve natural resources, to eliminate your off-site nutrient loads, to develop irrigation techniques that will conserve water. This has all been done through outreach. And this is all being facilitated by the University of Florida and the Institute of Food and Agriculture Sciences. Crystal Snodgrass is here today, and she works underneath Charlie, and they are the representatives for this organization here in Manatee County. If you have any questions about what you can do, Crystal is the person to talk to. So, Crystal, if you'd raise your hand, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So, there's been a huge outreach. Everybody goes in agriculture, and this has been facilitated by the Florida Department of Agriculture and IFAS to sign up for best management plans. And you have to explain your nutrient management system and your best management practice for irrigation and various other things, all in the effort to conserve natural resources and make a positive impact on the environment while we're feeding a nation. We're not making widgets here. We're feeding. And without a restaurateur like Ed Childs or a farmer like me, there's a lot of people that don't get fed today. And it's important that we secure our food source, not from overseas, but from right here in the United States of America. If you want the safest food you can possibly eat, you buy it from the United States of America. So those are just some things that I wanted everybody to understand. To implement these best management practices, there has been cost share opportunities that have been facilitated through the Florida Department of Agriculture and the water management districts. And so this is through a ranking type process. You can put an application in, and if you're going to conserve a large amount of water or make huge impacts to nutrient reduction, and let's just say, for instance, the project will cost $100,000, that they will cost share anywhere from 50 to 75% of that nutrient and natural resource conservation practice, all in the effort to do something good for our country, all right, to do something good for you and me. It is a true win-win situation where not only are we producing more with less, we're conserving natural resources, and we're putting less loads into the environment. I need about 10 more minutes. I hate to, but so I think there's a lot of things to do that we all can potentially do. And so this is where I want to go with this. We've been working on this a long time in agriculture, but where's the outreach been to everybody else? You can look at the best management maps across the state and what properties are enrolled in it, and you're going to see nothing but agriculture, okay? These major municipalities, suburban and urban realms are not in a best management plan. Why is that? How come we all can't have a best management plan? Again, if we all do a little bit, it's going to cumulatively add up to a whole lot. So the question comes is, how do you educate people? Because this really comes down to the problem. I've talked to so many people about this, and everybody wants to make a positive impact. I've heard Ed Childs' conversation countless times. Here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. Well, what's the solution? So how can we educate people? How can we get people to want to educate themselves? How can you get people to implement what they've learned? That's a big mouthful right there. Crystal and I have had a lot of conversations about it. She's had some of the best programs that you could put together about implementing best management practices, and there's 10 people show up. How can we impact everybody and get everybody on board so we're all moving in the right direction? We all want the same thing. We all want clean water. We all want a nice environment. We all want to catch fish. We want to go watch a nice sunset and have a glass of wine down at the beach house. That's the Florida lifestyle. So the question comes is, how can we do that? And I've got to say, we've got to incentivize people to want to educate themselves. And through some sort of tax incentive, I think there's a way that we can do this. Some sort of tax credit that we can, you gonna push me out of here? Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, there's an opportunity to do this, and if we all pay property taxes, right? Who are the people we need to educate? And that's the property owners, the business owners here in the state of Florida to implement best management plans on their own piece of paradise. Let's provide an incentive to educate everybody so we all can make the right decision and work towards a common goal of clean, healthy Florida. Let's promote a plan that will create a platform for all Floridians who want to leave the state a better place than they found it. Thank you.
Now's the time for our members to ask questions of any of the panelists or all of the panelists. To ask a question, you must be a member of Manatee Tiger Club Bay Club. See Elaine if you want to sign up and ask a question. I'm sure she'll take your money. Remember, members are limited to one question. Please state your name clearly as close to the mic as you can get, because we don't have good electronics today, and whether you're a member. Please.
My name is Jane Hunsicker, and I am a member. And for those of you who don't know me, I also have degrees in molecular biology, microbiology, and biochemistry. I have been looking at the issues surrounding Florida water for quite a while, and I was hoping that we would have a scientist on our panel today to whom I could address some more scientific questions. So in lieu of that, I would like to address my comments to our elected officials who are here in the audience and ask you, what are your plans at your level of administration to remediate some of the issues that we have with water, and also to offer some potential solutions? We have two of the most prominent bioremediation companies in the area that I'm aware of, one in Manatee County and one in Sarasota County, available here locally. And there are bioremediation solutions to specifically cyanobacteria. And I have an article that I brought for anyone who wants it, looking at the bioremediation options for cyanobacteria, which are our blue-green algae problems. And I'm quite sure that if you discuss with either of the two bioremediation companies here in the area, that they will offer you potential methods for exploring bioremediation for red tide as well. Every living organism has another organism that will kill it.
If you don't have any questions for the panelists, I'm not going to ask the audience to stand and address that. Go to a county commission meeting and then.
I'd like to say something to that, if you wouldn't mind.
No, that's
just to
fine.
follow up with what you were talking about. We had a panel discussion with Moat Marine here recently.
Yeah, you want to come to the mic?
So we had a panel discussion with Moat Marine here recently, and they spoke to bioremediation. And so I introduced them to a company called BioSafe. And BioSafe is a company that works in many open water areas all across the country, and we were to bring them down here, and they are part of their research projects right now about understanding what is there something that we can do from a biological standpoint that will take care of that Carina brevis. So I appreciate your comments, and let's let you know they are working on such things.
Betsy, your question?
Good afternoon, Betsy Benak, and I am a member. And I have a question for the panel, for all of you to answer, and for all of you to think about in the audience. Would you be willing to pay more taxes to improve our stormwater quality runoff, recognizing that stormwater runoff treatment was a fairly recent development in Florida to have those requirements? Would you be willing to pay more taxes to improve stormwater runoff? And if you have the knowledge, such as Mr. Hunsicker probably does, what are some of the things that we might be able to do if we did have more resources to improve stormwater runoff?
Charlie, you want to start?
Okay, I'll jump up a second. realizing I'm speaking to one of my bosses. No,
Remember, we can't discuss this when we're here.
That's
We
right,
cannot
that's correct.
discuss.
I will say this, I would be unwilling to pay a tax that is based on my property value only. I'd be willing to pay a fee that's based on my contribution as a property owner to the stormwater system. A parking lot of 1 acre or a house with 1 acre lawn is the same spot. My house might be more than the parking lot, but the parking lot is going to contribute more stormwater to the problem. So I would ask the parking lot owner to pay a fee relative to their discharge. That's a fairer way to do it than simply property value, I think. But what we would be able to do with that fee is start going to the areas that did not have the stormwater treatment required of them when they built their systems. And that's primarily the this is not a loaded question, but primarily those developments in the South County area that came to us before 1970s. And to take a look at them where we can intercept stormwater before it gets into Sarasota Bay. Along Bowley's Creek is one area down there, areas to the north. There are many things that we can do as a government that replicates what new developments are now doing within their own internal systems. And we can intercept and treat that water quality, as well as address some of the serious flooding problems we have in Manatee County as well. But for water quality purposes, it's absolutely necessary because that's an orphaned service. There's very little funding out there for water quality treatment. And many governments in Florida have responded by creating that user fee system, such as City of Bradenton, City of Palmetto, Holmes Beach, Braden Beach, and Anna Maria, and Sarasota County, and everybody else. We're one of the few counties that want to move in that direction as staff, and we'll be recommending that next year.
So exactly, I appreciate your comments. And so if you have some sort of environmental fee, that it can potentially be offset by a tax incentive, a fee incentive that will enable people to educate themselves. And so actually the person who would be educating themselves can sign on to a best management plan, and at the end of the day, they might be net neutral.
That's right.
And so, but the person who chooses not to educate himself, he will actually be paying the fee. And that fee would then be put in a specific fund that could not be rated for any other certain terms besides stormwater and nutrient reduction. Sarasota just put in the 10th Street boat ramp. There's like a big, huge box culvert type thing where the stormwater out of downtown Sarasota is going into this big, huge box culvert. There's a lot of nutrients, there's sediment, there's tires and everything else. Well, they can go through there with a machine and scoop all that out without it getting into Sarasota Bay. That is just one small thing we could potentially do. You know, but there needs to be some sort of environmental fee that if we really want to make moves in the future, we've got to start developing a fund that we can provide those cost share opportunities to make positive impacts to our environment.
Let me just quickly share a little something that the island did that I think we should be very proud of, and I think we're one of the few barrier islands in the country that has done this. We take sustainability seriously on Anna Maria Island. We are, and with what our city engineer, Lynn Burnett Townsend, has done for Braden Beach, now has gotten all 3 island cities to agree that now if you're going to build a lot on Anna Maria, you've got to spend $6,000 clearing out that lot and putting a filtration system in so that we don't drain stormwater into our bays or to our marine environment. So I think the policymakers, you know, everybody's get rid of regulation, get rid of regulation. Well, you know what? We need some regulation when it comes to water quality issues. All right? Florida is a $900 billion economy. You just heard Charlie, who knows more about it than I will ever know, say you can't find money for water quality issues. Are we going to put $1 trillion economy at risk because we're not willing to address water quality issues in our state? And are we going to wreck paradise? God dog, I hope not. So I think it's policymakers have got to do it. You know, what we were talking about a tax, it's I think what you do is a credit we got to have a nutrient loading credit. So if a clam farmer can get a credit for doing clams, if you can get a credit for lessening nutrient loading in any way, shape, or form, then you're going to get a relief or something else that you've got to pay a tax for.
Reward people for doing the right thing.
It's easy to look at the individuals for increased taxes. But I think if we look at the budget, the county budget, there's room in the impact fees that were given away to the developers that needed to be fully funded by developers for the increased development when you're talking about stormwater runoff. When you're also looking at the way the county balanced its budget this year on the backs of some of our children and the Children's Services Initiative, one of the things that I'm impressed with at the county level is their budget stabilization fund, where they practice preparing for a rainy day. And when the homestead exemption was proposed to be increased another $25,000 on our homes to a $50,000 exemption, they began already to cut back. And children have suffered this year for that preparation. And I think, I don't know about you, but there were a lot of us surprised that that homestead exemption actually did not pass. There are voters telling our elected officials we're willing to pay for services. We need to tie the appropriate costs where they belong, and I think the developers do need to pay fully for the impact fees that are on the books for them to pay. We also need to be regulating, like Ed mentioned, but to include fines. When Mosaic pays nearly $2 billion in fines in 2015 for mismanagement, and then a year later we have a catastrophic sinkhole collapse, what impact has come down on Mosaic for their role in feeding? If you look at the public records, you'll see that Mosaic is feeding radioactive toxic waste filled with phosphogypsum into our rivers and streams. It's well documented, and they continue to break the rules, and then they use fresh water to dilute those levels of toxicity that are feeding the red tide and the green algae. We need to look at these corporations for their impact and the cost to all of us. And when it comes to public health, you can't measure that cost in dollars. And when you go through it, I didn't get a chance to tell you, but we've got a horse that's got cancer, and our doctors don't believe any of this is a coincidence. We're drinking radioactive water, and when they tell you they're testing your water, Mosaic told the neighbors over there they're testing that water too, but they weren't testing for radium. So you need to take it into your own hands and test what you need to test to know if your water is healthy.
Well, it looks like there are no more questions, so I will ask Matt Bauer. Are you going to ask a question, Matt, or make an award?
I think we're out of time. Yes?
By 2 minutes. If you got a quick question, go ahead.
Nothing quick about mine, so I'll just take it back.
Okay. Well, Matt is going to award the Tiger by the Tail for the best question. You've got 2 choices.
On behalf of the board, since technically we only actually had a question, but I also loved the responses by the members, Betsy Benak will win the Tiger by the Bay Tail Award.
Professor Jack Davis from the University.
Ed brought a book that he enjoys and believes that a lot of people should be reading. It's a history of the Gulf. It's called The Gulf, The Making of an American Sea. It's by a University of Florida professor, Jack E. Davis. And can you sum it up in a sentence?
Listen, if you're concerned about Gulf issues, this is a great read. Very important work.
Well, thank you all for attending our luncheon. I think we had a very interesting and spirited discussion today. And thanks to all our speakers for coming and providing that. And thanks to our Board of Directors and Program Committee. Please stand. Our next luncheon is in January. Today is our last luncheon of the year since the third week in December is too close to Christmas. The topic will be announced probably later in December. And members and guests, if you know someone who might be interested in an upcoming topic, please invite them as your guest. And remember, Pier 22 provides complimentary parking for our luncheons. Thanks to Charles Clapsaddle and METV crew for taping and broadcasting our forum on METV channels and YouTube. Check their website, metvweb.com, for times and links. Thank you all again.